From what's to come of Alberta's Auditor General to the growing list of recall petitions and a move to mandate math and reading assessments. Time now for tonight's politics panel. And joining us this evening, Chaldeans Mensah, faculty member in the Department of Political Science at MacEwan University, and Rob Breakenridge, broadcaster, columnist, and host of the Line Alberta podcast. Good evening to you both. And let's begin with the UCP government looking to hire a new Auditor General. Preparations to replace an AG who was engaged in multiple investigations.
We're confident that the office will remain and that a new Auditor General will continue with that work and continue with whatever it is that the former AG was doing.
This is the government choosing to fire, to remove the individual that is currently investigating them in one of the most serious scandals, some of the most serious allegations we've ever seen against an Alberta government before he's had the chance potentially to complete that work.
Doug Wiley's 8-year term expires in April, and he offered to stay on for 2 more years. However, UCP members voted during a legislative committee meeting Monday to a search committee to start the process to fill the role. Among ongoing investigation, Wiley looking into the province's health procurement process after corruption allegations were made by the former head of HS. Chaldeans, I'll start with you. To what degree should this be considered the government firing the Auditor General?
Michael, I don't think this is a case of firing of the Auditor General. This is normal process. The legislature's all-party standing committee on legislative offices, their job is to look for a process to bring in a new Auditor General. The current Auditor General's job is coming up coming to an end next April. I think that there is a kind of a combination of issues in terms of the desire to have a process that completes that a review that he's doing, and also bring in a new person who takes over after he's left the scene. So there is a perception problem here because it appears that he's not going to get the extension that he needs, and people are interpreting that as firing. I don't think this is firing. This is a normal process, and the work will continue.
Rob, it was the UCP majority on that committee that voted to reject the AG's proposal for a 2-year extension to complete investigations. How do you see that decision reflecting on the Smith government, especially in the wake of the Wyant report?
Well, it's interesting, too, amid the request for some additional resources to conduct, further investigations. So we got situations, and it also applies, I think, to the chief electoral officer and even arguably to Alberta classrooms, where the Alberta government is making all of these changes, piling on all these additional problems for these various authorities to deal with, but they're not getting the resources to back them up. So it sort of speaks to, in the case of the Auditor General, sort of a pattern here where it comes across as though maybe the Auditor General is being stymied a little bit here. All these changes in Alberta Health Services and all these new agencies, he's trying to stay on top of all of this, and it doesn't seem like anyone's going out of their way to make his job easy. And then with regard to this investigation into this scandal, I mean, it is the end of his term, so sure, he's not being fired. But the request to stay on just to make sure he can complete this work, it seems like a pretty reasonable request, and it doesn't appear as though the government's given a good reason as to why that would be denied, just sort of adhering to, the calendar and our hands are tied. I mean, they're not. They could grant this request, and, so there's a pretty clear link, I think, for people to draw here. A problematic investigation politically for the government. They're not going out of their way to make sure that it can get done thoroughly by this Auditor General. That does create a perception problem.
Chaldeans, when it comes to replacing AG Wiley, how much public scrutiny do you expect there to be on the selection process for whomever comes next, the next Auditor General?
Well, Michael, I think the Auditor General plays a very important role in our system. They're non-partisan, and they're supposed to hold the government accountable, provide oversight of how government funds are used. They also can be very, very important when they audit government processes. Michael, you recall the former Auditor General MacEwan in 2014 came up with a very a strong report on Alison Redford's expense practices and use of government assets. That led to a major change in Alberta politics. So the work that Doug Riley is doing is significant. And I think that they have to, the committee that is reviewing has to make sure that the process is above board and that merit is the determining factor in choosing an Auditor General that will uphold that non-partisan, very probing look at material weaknesses and internal controls of the government.
All right. Next up, another government MLA is facing a citizen-led recall petition. According to Alberta's chief electoral officer, a recall campaign has been approved for Angela Pitt, the UCP MLA for Airdrie East. Gordon McClure hasn't indicated what reasoning was given by the applicant, who will now be in a position to start collecting signatures on Wednesday. The other approval recall petition is for Education Minister, Calgary MLA Dimitrios Nicolaides. Rob, efforts are said to be in the works to recall a number of UCP MLAs, maybe even including the member for Calgary Northwest, Rajan Sani, the Minister of Indigenous Relations. How much momentum do you see building here?
Well, quite a bit. It's interesting how this tool that the government has created is kind of being used against them, which, again, once you put it out there, you can't really control how it's used. I know Dimitrios Nicolaides was kind of complaining about this recall, suggesting it was for like the wrong reasons, as though that somehow exists. That the tool is there, and really all that exists is the threshold for the petition and all of those rules. It was interesting, though, to see the chief electoral officer before that same committee on Monday saying, look, we've got the Thomas Lukaszuk petition. Now there's this other petition to force a referendum on private school funding. Now all these potential recalls. That's a lot for our office to handle, everything that goes into that. We need some more resources so we can try to stay on top of all of this. And he didn't get what he was asking for. So again, it's a situation, the government created this rule, they created the process, but the people tasked with administering it are just kind of scrambling to keep their heads above water. But the one thing I would caution, though, I mean, you take Angela Pitt, for example, in Airdrie East. She won re-election in the last election. She had about 62 or 63% of the vote. So, it's one thing to get enough petitions to force a recall vote, but actually defeating some of these MLAs, especially in UCP strong ridings, that's a whole other task. So something else to keep in mind. It's one thing for a petition to succeed, but actually voting someone out of office, that's a whole other ballgame.
And Chaldeans, how much political debate, even political pushback, do you see building over how recall legislation is being used here?
Well, Michael, this is a Pandora's box. The UCP, with its rules from the Wild Rose, wanted to introduce these direct democracy mechanisms and hopefully give their supporters a bit of political space to hold government officials accountable. But what is happening is that the progressive side of Alberta politics has seen the vehicles, recall, and initiatives as an opportunity to hold the UCP government accountable. So we are seeing a growth of the use of these mechanisms, and I think that it will generate a response from the government. The AGM of the UCP is coming up this November. I'm certain that they will bring up some of these issues. They need to go back and assess whether these instruments are useful the way they are being used.
All right, yeah, that AGM coming up in just a couple of weeks' time. Time for us to take a bit of a break, but when we come back, fallout from provincially mandated screening tests for math and literacy. More from our politics panel in a moment. Welcome back. We heard from the University of Calgary's Dr. Maren Ackerman on the new provincial education bill mandating screening tests in math and literacy for students in kindergarten to grade 3. Chaldeans, what kind of read do you have on why it would be necessary for the government to legislate this, make it law if it's already provincial policy?
Well, first of all, Michael, I think having data to inform your policy making is important. I mean, the government, actually, I'm surprised that they're using this legislative approach because they, backed off things like data on class sizes. They've reintroduced it back. So perhaps they're being a bit more, I'm being charitable here, wanting to be a bit more rigorous in getting the data that informs their decision making. But I think that Dr. Ackerman makes some extremely useful points. They have to look into the methodology that they're using, its impact on teachers, and they have to produce the resources that will help address some of the issues that came up during the teachers' strike on complexity of classrooms. So I think that, Michael, I think this legislative option is perhaps designed to elicit the data that they need to better inform their policy making in the legislature.
Rob, you have a column in the Calgary Herald today following up on Bill 2 and the government's use of the notwithstanding clause. How do you see this legislation over assessment playing in the wake of the government abruptly ending the teacher strike?
Yeah, I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing this now. I mean, look, the government's really been put through the political ringer over how they handled the teachers' strike, the decision to use the notwithstanding clause, the way in which Bill 2 was rammed through all three stages, all three readings, and the committee stage all in one night. So, handling of that has not been popular. I think when it comes to these issues of curriculum and getting back to the basics and standards and making sure the kids are meeting certain standards, I think they feel that they're on a little more solid ground, that the public's, I think, more sympathetic to that approach. They like the idea of knowing where kids are at and measuring progress and having those kind of standards that apply across the province. So this is a bit of a signal, I think, to just say, well, we're going to legislate what we're already doing, so nothing really changes there, but maybe they prefer the conversation to happen on that front. The problem is, though, that this is not happening in a vacuum. Everything else that the teachers are dealing with, all the issues that came up in this teacher strike around class sizes, classroom complexity, now you want to add this to the mix as well. And again, a pretty paltry amount to try to cover the additional costs of implementing all of this. So I think it falls once again on the backs of teachers, and there's not really a plan to make sure that this can be smoothly implemented and that it's not disrupting or taking away from everything else, all these other things that led to such frustration from teachers in the first place.
Chaldeans, from a political perception standpoint, how likely is this legislation to draw attention away from that considerable debate over the government's use of the notwithstanding clause?
Yeah, I mean, if you want to look in terms of political distraction, I mean, this is taking away a bit the focus away from the notwithstanding clause and the controversy that it generated. But I think that, look, Alberta, it must be prepared for the future, and our kids are in competition with kids around the world. So I think that the government is wanting to have that data to better address some of these issues of complexity. But I think that the key here is not just make this a 1-week effort, but you need to put the resources, as Rob was mentioning, behind that effort so that people don't see it as just a political maneuver, but a real commitment to address some of the issues that teachers face in the classroom.
Well, and on the doctor's point earlier, there will be data now to follow in that regard. Gentlemen, we have to leave it there for time. Great to see you both. Thank you kindly.
Thank you very much, Michael. Bye-bye.